I was not born with an excess of talent at all. I mean, I've been around people. I went to art center with people who were. I didn't have that. But what I was born with was an excessive love for it. And I worked so hard because I loved it, and I got better at it because I loved it so much. And I got pretty good at it because I kept doing it and I loved it. And I would just tell anybody based on that, just keep doing it. If you love it, don't give up on it. Just carry a sketchbook with you. Draw whatever's around you. That'll help you with your digital work. It'll help you with design. Look at things through the eye of a designer. And take your sketchbook and do not give up. Just keep going forward with it. If you love it, it's going to be a labor of love. It's going to come like falling out of the boat and hitting water.
Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Artist Decoded. I'm your host Yoshino, and this is my conversation with narrative painter, illustrator, and artist Chris Hopkins. And if that name sounds familiar, you might have heard my interview with his wife Jan Hopkins on this very podcast, or you might have heard about his son Justin Dosher Hopkins, who has been a guest interviewer on the podcast, and he's also a really great artist himself and someone that I've collaborated with on multiple projects. But if you haven't heard of Chris before, you should have, because he's a legend in the illustration community. And let me read you a bit about him in his bio. So after a high-profile career designing, drawing, and painting images for movie poster art in Hollywood, a couple of movies that you might have heard, Return of the Jedi, Labyrinth, Indiana Jones, and the Temple of Doom, to name a few, Chris now feels driven to produce works which celebrate compelling stories of American preservances, the Tuskegee Airmen, First Nations peoples of America's Pacific Northwest, and one of my personal favorites, maybe because I'm partial because I am Japanese American, but the Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during World War II. And this is actually a project that he collaborated with his wife, Jan Hopkins, and you can go back through the archive and listen to that compelling interview. But let me read you a bit more about Chris. So it's been an unusual career path, to say the least, for Chris. Chris was a star on the Southern Oregon College wrestling team when he dropped out in 1974, rather than bow to the inevitable pressure to become a high school wrestling coach. He loaded up his 68 sky blue Camaro and hit the road, picking up jobs from Southern California to Montana and living out of his car. And after he ran out of gas in Boise, Idaho, he settled there for a year and a half and worked as a bouncer at the Bronco Hut, the college bar where he met his wife. We talk about that a little bit in this episode. He was a lift operator at a ski resort and as an utterly unqualified counselor at a home shelter for troubled boys. All the time he created art, drawing behind the bar, sculpting unflattering portraits of ski resort personnel, and carving the bar's billy club into a more appealing shape. I wonder what shape that is. But anyways, Chris's older brother convinced him he'd soon be too old for his bohemian, aimless lifestyle, and that he might want to apply to the prestigious Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles. He put together a crude portfolio, submitted an application, and remembers, quote unquote, "It surprised the crap out of me when I was actually accepted." And in the middle of the college program, Chris still hadn't figured out a painting system that he liked. So one weekend, he locked himself in a room and refused to come out until he'd conquered it. In 1979, he graduated from Art Center with honors. So, you may say, a diploma from art school? So what's next? Pouring and finishing concrete for foundations, walkways, driveways, and most everything else that required concrete until he heard that legendary illustrators Charles White III and David Willardson were starting a studio and looking for young talent. Chris's persistence paid off, and he was hired. We talk about this too in the podcast. And after months of sketching, he was finally assigned to paint the marquee art for The Mountain Men. Soon afterwards, he discovered the airbrush, and the whole process became fun, especially incorporating brushwork with airbrush techniques. He painted the clouds, skies, and water, all from his Pacific Northwest childhood memories, and was known as the Sky King, a tribute to his unmatched ability to paint natural backgrounds. After 4 years, Chris left Willardson and White ready for his next challenge, painting people. Yes, he learned to do that too, painting and drawing the comprehensive and finished poster and magazine promotional art for Return of the Jedi, Peggy Sue Got Married, Labyrinth, The Abyss, and who could forget the portrait of the Studley Harrison Ford on the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom theatrical advance poster art. I mean, I can't get it out of my head. So in 1988, he picked up his family and relocated to the state of Washington, where he's once again tackled a new but classic technique. Now he's brush painting stories of American preservances. So that was from his bio. I didn't write that myself. That was purely from his bio and part of his history, but I felt like it gives a lot of context into this episode, where we talk a lot about his artwork, how he got into it, and he has this certain comedic candor that I found really interesting, and it was fun to just be able to riff with him. So, also, before we begin, I have to point this out. He worked on a show called Hidden Heroes, the Nisei Soldiers of World War II, which is on the History Channel. It premiered on November 11th, so you should definitely go and check that out and check out some of Chris's work. So I hope you like this episode. Before we start, please go to our iTunes page, click on that 5-star review. Doesn't take much. Just go there, click on the 5 stars, leave a little review. Tell us how much you like the podcast. And if you don't like the podcast, then hey, you don't have to listen, right? You can just change it to something else. But hopefully you do like the podcast and you'll leave a review. Anyways, so here is my conversation with legendary illustrator and painter Chris Hopkins. Hope you enjoy it. All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
You bet.
I appreciate you for taking this time.
Anytime, buddy.
Oh, thanks. Well, okay, so I guess my first question is, was art and creating art embraced in your household growing up?
Well, my mother was very talented. She loved art, but no, not really. My father was totally opposite. He had absolutely no artistic bone in his body at all. So if it came from my household, it'd have to be from my mother.
So she was really supportive of you wanting to become a professional artist.
Well, they both were in different ways. I mean, my mother had this real sensitive side to her, although she came from Cicero, Illinois, where the same area as Al Capone and these people. So she had a rough edge, but she absolutely loved the arts. My father, on the other hand, he was what you would call a real man in the sense that he was very strong. He was very decisive. Like I said, didn't have an artistic bone in his body, but was totally devoted to my mother and his 2 sons. And when he got older, he would do things like, he'd always show up at my wrestling matches because I wrestled most of my life, and if I won, he'd run out on the mat, slap me on the backside, and tell me how great I did. If I lost, he'd run out on the mat, slap me on the backside, and tell me how great I did. Even though I'd tell him, Dad, I lost. Yeah, but you looked great doing it. He was that kind of a guy. So when I finally let him know that I was going to, when I got accepted into this really, expensive art school, and he thought it was totally useless, but he didn't tell me this. He kept the secret because his idea was to see that his sons would pursue their dreams, what they wanted to do. He was one of these guys that say, follow your heart, but take your brains with you. And when I told him, I called him on the phone and said, I got accepted into this art school. I actually talked to my mother first, and she said, son, that's wonderful. Thank you. Tell your dad. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, I got into this art school. It's real expensive. It's great. He comes back being an old Army sergeant that he was. He says, oh, damn it, son. That's fantastic. I'm so proud of you. I can't tell you. Then he put his hand over the microphone and tell my mother, God, what's he thinking? What the hell's the matter with him? Jesus Christ. Then he'd get back on the phone with me. He's, go get him, son. Give him hell. Be the best damn artist you could be, damn it. Then
Did you hear that?
No, my mother told me this afterwards. She told me all about it. And he'd cover up the receiver again. He'd go back and say, what the hell is he going to do? He's going to live under a bridge, and in a couple of years he'll be barking at telephone poles. I mean, what's he going to do with art? But he would never tell me this, and they would sacrifice to help me realize this dream that I had. So these are the type of parents I had. I came from very supportive parents and a very supportive brother as well.
Wow, that's great. So I know that, like, when you were, I think the story goes, when you were 19 or 20, you were working as a ski lift operator, and then you came across some sort of pamphlet about Art Center. And for those listeners out there that don't know what a pamphlet is, it's basically like a piece of paper that's printed out and folded into trisectional, I don't even know if that's a word, areas to create some sort of informational sheet.
Well, actually, it was a brochure.
Oh, okay. Brochure. Same thing,
or
maybe.
A catalog, actually.
Okay.
Let's get into, we'll make it straighter, a catalog.
Yeah. Catalog. That sounds good. So I know that you were also on a wrestling scholarship during that time. So what made you decide to quit being a ski lift operator, go to Art Center, and not go into wrestling for like collegiate wrestling?
So I can give you the long answer to this.
I want the long answer. Yeah.
The long answer. Oh, what a glutton for punishment. Yes.
Let's hear the long answer.
Well, when I was wrestling, and I was working really hard at it, Southern Oregon, and I had wrestled in the Oregon Invitational. It was the last match I ever wrestled in, and it was at a time where I didn't see any future in it. I loved the sport. I'd been doing it since the 5th grade, and I was starting to go into my junior year of college. And I wrestled this behemoth at this place. I wrestled heavyweight, and I only weighed like 185 pounds or something. A lot of these heavyweights were like 270s. I wrestled one guy that was over 400 pounds from Boise State.
Wow.
And it was just, and it was just really kind of crazy. I was really small. But I wrestled this one guy. His name was Hank Schenk, and he was straight off the Olympic team. He'd wrestled in the 1972 Olympics, and this was like 1974. And he wasn't as big as the other guys. He was like 220 pounds, but he was just, solid brick. And it was just ugly. For me it was. I mean, I got my butt handed to me pretty quickly. I'd like to, beguile you and to say that it was, tooth and nail and all that, but it wasn't. He cleaned my clock. And that didn't force me to quit, but it just made me realize that the end game for this would to be a wrestling coach. And that was a talent and a passion that I didn't have. These wrestling coaches that I know were so good because they have the passion for it. They have the desire. They have a talent. I didn't have that. I wanted to be an artist. And I went to my coach and I told him, I said, Coach, I'm dropping out of school next year. I won't be back. Because I want to, I'm going elsewhere. And my coach, he was this Hall of Fame coach, and he was a great guy. And he just, Chris, just as you start getting good, you get up and you leave. He said the next 2 years would have been yours, all this kind of stuff. And I thought I was going to get an epic chewing out, but then he just said, Chris, he knew why I was leaving. He said, you go find this art school and you be the best artist you can be. And if you ever come back, you come and see me, and we'll just hang out together and we'll have some laughs. So I left, and then the school I was going to go to didn't pan out. So here I was, cut loose, nowhere to go, living out of my car, doing odd jobs here and there. And I ended up in Boise, Idaho. And I got a job as a bouncer, which I was totally unequipped for, at the college bar. I was the worst person for that job. I didn't really want it. I was a bartender, but they moved me up to bouncer because of my wrestling background. And they'd have all these crowds come in, and my idea of crowd control was cream pies and seltzer bottles, and I didn't, I didn't want to get hit, and I didn't want to hit anybody. So I got that. Then I got another job working at the local ski mountain, which is Bogus Basin. And I was a lift operator. And I was also, at Christmas, they dressed me up as Santa Claus, and I'd ski around and give candy to the kids, and flirt with the ladies and talk with the guys, with my beard on. And back then I had to put pillows, under my coat. I don't need that now, but sadly, but back then I did. So yeah, I embarked on a number of strange jobs, and I always wanted to be an artist. And so I went to the Boise State Library, and I'd go through these pamphlets and these brochures, and I found one on the Art Center. And I had a tendency I was young and I was unscrupulous, and I would take catalogs out of there. I would take, cut sheets out of illustration annuals, things I would have not admitted to back then, but I'm admitting to now. And then I saw that, this is what I want to do. I saw some pieces in there by these great illustrators like, Mark English and, Bart Forbes and Bernie Fuchs and things like that, were names in my day back then. Mm-hmm. And I said, this is what I want to do. And so I worked hard, and I did apply to the Art Center after a while. So.
Wow. So you went to, I'm sorry, was it Oregon State?
Southern Oregon University, yeah.
So you finished 2 years.
2 years, yes.
And then after those 2 years, then you went up to Boise.
I went to Montana to start with. I was going to try to get in school there, and then found out that for a host of reasons was a real bust. And I ended up coming back. Like I said, I was doing odd jobs here and there, and I ended up in Boise, Idaho, because I knew a guy there who I'd gone to college with, who was working at a boys' shelter home, and he got me a job at the boys' shelter home, which was another excrement show, because I knew nothing about it except that I would get free room and board at the end of it. And I didn't have a college degree, so I had to go in front of a board of child welfare in Boise, and convince them that I was appropriate for the job, even though I didn't have an education, which was really silly, because I had no idea what I was doing. And I convinced these people that I could do this job, because I wanted a place to live and whatnot. And they were very kind, and they believed what I told them. And when I got to this place, and I was there for about a week, I thought, oh my God, these kids are nuts. I got to get out of here. So I was not equipped for that job, but that was my life back then.
Yeah, that's interesting.
No, it's ridiculous. It was, but ridiculous. I mean, get real. That's a ridiculous way to live by the seat of your pants like that.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I mean, it must be interesting also to have those realizations and experiences when you were so young too, and being able to look back at it. And I mean, you were saying that you were living in your car, and which I think is kind of interesting, because nowadays I think it could be just a a cultural dynamic where there's a lot of people that they call it wanderlusting. Mm-hmm. So essentially a lot of people around my age, or like millennials, for instance, get vans, and they go travel everywhere, but they're just kind of like vagabonds. And actually, have you ever seen that movie Nomadland?
No, I've heard of it, but I don't think I've seen that one yet.
I think you would really like that movie. It's really interesting, and it talks about the romanticization of that life, like, living in a van, but then also the realities of someone who basically is like homeless and traveling around because, in their later in life, I think she's around late 50s, early 60s, and just kind of the sadness that is engrossed around that reality. I don't know. It just made me think of that when you said living in your car.
Well, I would also, I would find places. I mean, I would meet people, and, I'd stay with them from time to time. But it was a real interesting sort of lifestyle, because you have to remember, this is long before cell phones. This is long before the digital era. There was no social media or anything.
No social media.
No, hard to believe. I know.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was smoke signals and carrier pigeons back then. So.
It's probably better too.
Well, it was a lot easier, I think. A little more clarity, but so you really, you really didn't have anything to fall back on. And sometimes you had to trust things, and other times you couldn't trust anything, as far as like trusting gas station sushi or something. It was just, it was an interesting lifestyle, and I met a lot of people, and I had some great experiences. I mean, which kind of formed a lot of what I am now, as far as what I do now.
Yeah.
And it's just a strange, wonderful way to live. I wouldn't advise it to anybody, but for me at the time it worked. And again, when I didn't have any cell phone or anything else, my poor parents, they didn't know where I was. They had no idea. I mean, I'd have to go to a phone booth, from once a month and, call them collect or something. But, I feel, being a parent myself, I look back and think, oh my God, what a thoughtless thing for me to do at that time, in that respect. But it was great. I ended up, in Boise, and I found out about the art center there, applied, actually met this wonderful, wonderful girl there. I mean, she was incredible. And I met her when I was, I shouldn't tell this story. I could get in big trouble. I will. I was a bouncer. And it was, they had something at this college bar called Giggle Hour. And it was the worst night to work, because it was a meat market. The girls from the college would come in to meet the guys, this and that. Okay. What happens with cheap beer and very young people, because the drinking age was 19. And I saw this girl come in the door while I was working the door, and she just took my breath away. I thought, oh my God, I've got to meet this lady. She's fantastic. And then her sister comes in right after her. I knew her sister. She was a friend of mine. And then a guy comes in, and probably one of the very few guys in my whole career as a bouncer that I actually threw out. Because normally I do the Jedi mind trick and say, you want to make trouble here, you want to go to the bar down the street, and then they'd up and leave and things like that. Because they weren't, they're weak-minded. But this one guy comes in, and he was kind of being boisterous and stuff, so I had to throw him out. So I come up to my friend and say, my God, who's your sister? Can you introduce me? And she says, Chris, I need to talk to you. I said, yeah, you need to talk to me about your fine sister. And finally, she said, no, that guy you threw out. I said, I don't care about him. She said, that's her husband. I thought, oh, for God's sakes. and then what happened is I came back later from Art Center, saw her again, and I ended up marrying her. I mean, that's Justin's mother. And that was the story of how we met, a long time ago. When I came back, she'd been split up from her husband. I mean, I didn't steal anybody. I mean, she didn't cheat on him, and I was not I didn't go after married women. It was one of those things, but that is how I met my wife of 42 years now. So,
wow.
Yeah.
42 years. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. That's staying power. I mean, I feel sorry for her in a lot of ways, but so does everybody else.
Well, that's beautiful. And for the listeners out there, he's talking about Jan Hopkins, who was on the podcast a couple of episodes ago. So if you want to check that out,
she's great. So. She's great.
Of course. Yeah. She is amazing.
Yeah, she is.
So I guess going back into your time at Art Center.
Yes.
What did you do directly after Art Center? Because I heard from Justin, I heard from Justin that you went into blue collar work. Is that correct?
I did. I did do that very thing. I had no choice. When I was at Art Center, my last 2 terms there, it's an 8-term curriculum. My 7th and 8th term, I was doing some magazine work, locally. For some of the magazines in Los Angeles and for the NFL as well. And then when I graduated, I thought, well, things are just going to take off from here. And they didn't. Everything stopped. And by that time, I had, my wife, and I had 2 girls at home. And I was desperate, so I had to pour concrete. So I did that for a while until I got a real, a studio job at Willardson and White. Charles White and David Willardson had started a studio, and I got a job there. So
I think that's also a really interesting story too, which I think we should go into. But so I just want to make, just for the people listening out there too, I was thinking about it, and, Philip Glass, the composer, he was a plumber, and he was also known to be a taxi driver before he made it, and, made it big, I guess, if you want to say.
Sure.
And the novelist Toni Morrison, was an editor at Random House for 20 years.
Mhm.
And I think, it's just, I think a lot of people have that sort of, especially a lot younger people, have that sort of romantic idea of what an artist's life should be like. And then they actually kind of become a caricature of what that artist should look like, but then they're actually not being themselves. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I just find that interesting because I think there's a lot of these like artists' lives that people like romanticize, but the reality of the situation is, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And, doing a part-time job or a full-time job, there's nothing wrong with that.
Oh no, that's what I was. I mean, that's what I did before I went to Art Center. I did. Not only when I was in Idaho, let's say, not only did I, work at the bar and work at that boys' shelter home and work at the ski area, but I also did concrete work there in the summertime. And in Oregon, I worked at a mill pulling green chain. I worked at parks, clearing areas. I stocked sheetrock. I did a lot of labor stuff. When you were from the part of town that I lived in Southern Oregon, you had two sides, the east and the west side. The east side, people had money and the kids got jobs at air-conditioned places like, McDonald's, managers and stuff like that. Guys like us, myself, we'd be out there bucking hay bales in the heat and stuff like that. That's just kind of the way it was. Yeah. And also, I enjoyed doing that because that would get me in shape for wrestling season and things like, little things like that. But we always came from that sort of labor. The whole art thing was just, I think God was playing a trick on me, making me an artist when I should have been doing construction work for the rest of my life. I'm kind of this, a sensitive guy, trapped in a truck driver's body type thing, so.
Yeah. but I think that's really interesting because like, I'm curious. So when you were doing the blue collar work, how were you able to, after you got out of Art Center and everything, how were you able to balance out that life between having a kid doing the blue collar work and also pursuing a career in the arts?
Well, it was the blue collar thing. If I can understand your question here, was it's something I had to do to pay the bills. The art thing, I couldn't balance anything because I would come home so tired and I'd come home late. It was really, and it was a very sort of a depressing time for me doing that. The guys I worked with were really great guys in one aspect, in other aspects, not so great. And would have a tendency to drink afterwards, and I'd find myself drinking too much from time to time. Not often, because I never really had a problem with that, but it was very depressing. And all I would try to do is try to figure out how I could get back into the art market somehow. And I did pick up a couple of little black and white jobs for like $50 a job or something, which I would have to do late at night, and then go to work during the day doing concrete work and whatnot. Again, and then I just kept going until I finally found that break at, Willardson and White. And even that was out of sheer persistence. I went in there and the door was half locked for the meeting time I was supposed to meet with them. They tried to lock up and leave. They didn't. Or they left a secretary there. So I just jimmied the door and broke in, and the alarms went off and everything else. And the lady was kind of afraid, and I told her, no, I had an appointment, this and that. I may look weird, but no, I am an artist, actually, And she said, I thought you were a concrete worker. Well, not really. I'm an artist. Don't let the look fool you, So she told them, Charlie White and Dave Willardson, how persistent I was, and they admired that. And so I think they hired me mostly for my persistence.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I think something that's, interesting to make a statement about is that at Willardson and White, I believe this is how the story goes, is that you worked on Indiana Jones, Return of the Jedi, those movie posters, and you also got nominated for a Grammy for the Styx Paradise Theater album. Is that correct?
Well, you got 1 out of 3 of those right. I got, when I was at
Willardson, 1 out of 3.
1 out of 3. I
I'm
mean,
33% accurate. Oh well.
I'll tell you what's accurate. No, I did get the finalist for a Grammy when I was there for Styx Paradise Theater, but the Indiana Jones and the Return of the Jedi was after I left Willardson and White. That was when I was a freelance. So no, I did do those, but I just didn't do them at Willardson and White.
I see.
Yeah,
I just got the timelines.
Yeah. Outside of that, everything else was totally correct.
So what made you, like, how long did you stay at Willardson and White, and what were some of the key things that you learned from working for someone else?
Well, I worked there for 4 years, and working for Charlie and Dave, I learned that those two guys are nuts. I mean, I love them too. I mean, they're gifted. They're wonderful guys, and I so enjoyed working for them. And Dave Willardson is a good friend. Charlie White is like my crazy uncle, and I really developed a real love for these guys. Charlie would give you the shirt off his back, and I mean, he should have. I should have been fired many times from that place. I never was. So I worked with another artist there, Mick McGinty, who was probably, he recently passed away, and he was probably one of the most naturally gifted guys I've ever seen in humility. I mean, my God, he's the most humble guy too. But he and I would work there, and we'd come in and the place would be locked up, and we'd go into Charlie's office and super glue everything he had down on his desk, his paintbrushes, his smokes, his ashtrays, his telephone. I mean, we would do this because we were immature. We can always, grow up, but we were all, be young once, but be immature the rest of your life. And that's what we were. So Charlie would come in and he'd find everything glued down, and he'd come in and he'd, with like, Hopkins, I don't appreciate you doing that. He wouldn't even accuse Mick. It was always me. And I'd say, well, whatever do you mean, Charlie? I'm at a loss here. I have no idea what you're speaking about. And then he'd say, Hopkins, you cannot fool me. I said, Mick, do you know anything about this? No, I don't know anything about it. Oh, sorry, Charlie. I wish I could help you. And then he'd fume and storm down the hall. Then you could hear him laughing by the time he got back to his office. I thought, well, how come I don't get fired for this? So we'd keep it going, things like that. And it was a wonderful time. But I mean, I'm giving you a long answer. I learned that these are wonderful people. I learned that I made some great friends. I learned certain business aspects. I learned promotion, taking chances with promotion and things like that, and really learned to think outside the box in a whole myriad of areas. And that really came from those two guys, from Charlie White and David Willardson, and also what could be done creatively. I really was inspired by Mick McGinty on that.
So then what made you decide to want to go freelance?
Well, I wanted to make some money, really make better money, I think. And I just really wanted to try things out. I mean, we had some great experiences there. I really learned more about the movie business. I learned how to, with the advertising business, how to deal with art directors, although a lot of that came on my own, again, thinking out of the box, how to do things. But there were times that, the pressure of all of that would get to you, where you jump out of windows, which I did do actually one time. And,
what do you mean?
Out of a second story thing, actually, I ran and jumped for it. And,
wait, what?
Yeah.
I don't know the story.
Oh, didn't Justin ever tell you about Roar, that movie Roar?
He did a little bit, but maybe for the listeners, can you explain?
Yeah, I was at Willardson and White still at the time, and the assignment that I had was for a movie called Roar, which I guess has become a cult thing. And because I think the byline is, because I worked with all these lions and tigers and everything, and they said,
it's a really crazy movie.
Have you seen it?
I've seen parts of it, but I haven't seen it in its entirety. But a lot of the stunts in there were actually like them like wrestling with lions and stuff.
Well, right? Being mauled by lions, from what I understand. I never saw it. So I mean, it said something like, what was it? Not a single animal was hurt during this filming, but like 75 people were nearly killed or hospitalized or something like that.
Jesus.
And it was this crazy movie, but this guy who was put it together, it was his baby, a guy named Noel Marshall, and he, directed, starred, produced everything in it. And so it was just another job to me, and I was doing it. And after a while, it became a nightmare because he kept coming back and changing everything, and he changed his mind. And this guy was a producer of The Exorcist, which I guess should have told me something. And so he kept. It was just getting terrible. And we were up in a studio up in Laurel Canyon, and it was like a house, this big house with multi-levels, and it was like the Winchester House in San Jose, where it's always being built and nothing's being finished. And there was a second story sliding glass window. There was nothing underneath it. There was no deck. There was nothing. It just dropped off down into an incline down in the brambles down there. And I heard this guy Noel Marshall was coming back for about the 80th time, and I just couldn't take it. I just hit my limit. And I heard him, I heard that he was coming, and I looked down, I could see him driving his car, winding up the road, Laurel Canyon. So I just said, God, I can't take this. So I ran for it and just jumped out the window and landed in these brambles. And I'm laying down there, bleeding from all the little thorns and all this kind of stuff. And I look over and I see like a foot and a half from me, a big iron stake or something sticking up. And I thought, oh my God. So I go crawling back up there to the top. I said, in a state of shock, and what's almost happened. And I walk in, and then I hear on the intercom, Chris, meet Noel Marshall, and So I go stumbling in there, and Charlie White and Dave Willardson are looking at me bleeding and all disheveled and wondering what happened. And Noel Marshall, he could care less. He just sees me like that. Let's get down. I want this change. This. So okay.
That's hilarious.
Oh, no, I've got worse stories than that. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we can dive into some of those. I actually want to ask you about some of the adventures that you've been on.
Sure.
So I know that you went out to Afghanistan, right? I believe the story goes that you went on a mission in Afghanistan.
Yes.
And then you were surrounded by some extremist insurgents. Is that correct?
Well, what had happened is I was an artist for the Air Force, and they sent me to Afghanistan. Yeah, they said, well, do you mind going outside of the wire? And I didn't know what that meant at the time. I go, oh yeah, sure, whatever.
What does that mean?
That means you're going out into the war zone, and I'll say you're on the one side of the wire. You're safe. You go outside of the wire, you're in the war zone. And they said, well, we're going to send you left of boom. I go, oh, left of boom, cool. What's that? Well, that's in an area that has not gone to boom yet. Right of boom, that's post-war type thing. This is building up to the explosion and stuff. Oh, perfect. What do I tell my wife? Just tell her you're going there. Okay, all right. And so they loaded me up or loaded us up. I went to back east to D.C., and then we were supposed to fly out of Andrews Air Force Base. And they said, well, this has got to be very fluid. We're not going down. We're going out of Dover. Okay, where's that at? So that was another couple hours drive. They took us over there, Dover Air Force Base. And we left at midnight with the colonel, because we were told we have to bring black stuff, your blacks. So, okay. So we dressed in black, and we left that night from a very far end of the airfield, and there's hardly anyone on the C-17, and it's loaded up to the gills with crates. There's just a skeleton crew and myself and two other artists, and this colonel who's coming with us. And I asked him about, what is this? Oh, this is a hot flight. Oh, wow, really? What's a hot flight? Well, that means we have to just park away from everybody. I'll go, why? What are you carrying? Oh, these are just pyrotechnics. We'll just leave it at that. Thanks. That's good to know. So we went to Germany, and then from there we, at the very end of the base, and then they, ferried us back to where we were staying. Then we took off midnight the next day, went to Bagram, and all of they only have 2 portals on these things or something. And they had those all up, and they said, you got to wear your blacks. So we did, head to toe. And then you land, and you say you're far away from stuff. And they said, well, Taliban is here, and they might take a pot shot, if they know you're coming in with, pyrotechnics. So that's kind of messed up a little bit, but exciting. So anyway, we went there. We landed in the middle of the night. It was like 10 degrees out because it's the winter, and we were in the Hindu Kush Mountains is where Bagram is. Mm-hmm. And so I think the next day they said, okay, we're going to go over to the Russian gate. And I wasn't sure what that was. He said, you got to put all your armament on, because, I had to do artwork wearing a helmet and body armor and stuff like that. So,
Wow.
very sensitive. So anyway, they take us over to the Russian gate and they made us go through a series of these barbed wire gates. And then we go down a trench with your head down where, all your gear. And they had a couple guys escorting us. And they also had a guy in a tower, a sniper up above in a tower and everything else. And the guys told us, they said, when you get out at the end of this trench, you're going to be in a bazaar, a market area.
Mm-hmm.
People will not notice you to start with. They will notice you, and then they will close in. And then you take off and go back, where you came from. Okay. So you won't have time to draw, but you'll have time to take some pictures, So we did. We ran through there, and as soon as we came through there, we did open up into a bazaar. And then we heard our escorts, you heard the safeties go off on their M16s. And we said, oh man, that sound, all of a sudden, oh God, this shit just got real. So we're taking our shots and everything. And it was everything the guy said. They were milling around, and then they noticed us, and then they started closing in. And then our guy said, okay, let's go for it. Let's get out of here. So we ran back up the trench again and back, and we looked, they had one of these big vehicle units with a 50 cal on top, just to make sure. And I said, holy crap, they're going to use that stuff because of us.
Wow.
And they said, well, we just want to make sure you guys are safe. And said, appreciate it. And so that was, and the rest of the time I spent mostly at the Egyptian field hospital, because I was sick as a dog. And the Egyptians were just treated me great. It was really, they were really fantastic. And, went over to Kandahar and stuff like that. So
sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I'm all ears.
Oh no, I was going to say, how did you end up getting into that project?
Well, I was invited to be an Air Force artist, because a lot of that's, or be a member of the Air Force art program, and that's volunteer work. And so I started doing that, and and I had taken an assignment in Thailand, and I went back and covered humanitarian work back there, which is more of a humanity sort of a aspect of it, as opposed to like the nuts and bolts, meaning people who would paint and draw the aircraft. And there are people who are so passionate about that; they do great jobs at it, and they could paint an airplane better than I ever could. But they liked the way that I would paint and depict people, and they felt that it was what they wanted. So I would get these calls to go to these places like Central America and whatnot, for humanitarian issues and things of that nature. And it was just a really wonderful, let's say, collaboration between myself and the Air Force to be able to do these things and paint the human aspect of conflicts, let's say. Or else, like say in Thailand, there was no conflict there. They would just send like doctors and nurses down there to care for the people, and it was a real privilege to be able to record that. And of course, there are other things that came along with it. When I was in Central America, we had a detail of our security detail, where it's a husband and wife team, and we were in a place called Orange Walk in Belize, and it was inland. It's not by the resorty stuff on the coast at all. It was definitely inside by the jungles and the cane fields and whatnot. And we noticed that we had a security detail of, well, besides the couple, we had the Belizean military, which usually guys wearing fatigues that carrying M16s and stuff that walk around with us everywhere. Wow. Because these doctors, they didn't have anything. But the thing about these guys, it was so lackadaisical. We made friends with the military guys, and they let us play with their M16s and everything. It was just really ridiculous. I mean, I've got pictures of me doing it. It was nutty. And then finally, our security, the husband and wife came to me and said, Chris, you're the artist here. We've got a special request. And I said, okay, yeah. And then all of a sudden, my question why there were no police around and everything, kind of came to the forefront. They said, well, the cartel runs everything here. I said, oh, well, that's interesting. I said, and actually, the Don here, he's got a nephew who's an artist. And all of a sudden I thought, oh God, not me. Why don't you, I don't, there's another artist here. He's great. Why don't you go talk to him, So no, he wants to, he wants to talk to you about his nephew getting art representation in America. I don't know if I could do that. He said, well, what's he working? He works with a chainsaw. I thought, oh God, this is even getting better. So
a chainsaw?
Said, yeah, a chainsaw.
Does he make sculptures?
I hope he was carving wood with it, but
oh my God, that's so dark.
Anyway, and he said, "Well, we're going to have. We'll find you, and we'll set up a meeting with him." I said, "Okay, perfect." So I made sure I could not be found. I got on the bus before anybody that went out to these villages and stuff. I got on the boat before anybody. I just got out of there really quick. But there were things like that would happen, and it was an adventure. I would say it was an adventure. So
that's really interesting. Yeah, Justin was telling me a bit about that story in Belize, but it's interesting because I was under the impression that you actually went and taught this person.
Oh God, no! Oh no!
I'm glad that you had the foresight to not do that.
No. They said, the Don one, of the area there, the cartel said, no, please. Yeah. No, I made sure I stayed far, far away from that. I mean, I have a history with chainsaws well, I don't know. I mean,
I'm like, what is this history with chainsaws?
Well, no, I was working on a campaign for Husqvarna for their chainsaws, and I did a whole bunch of paintings of chainsaws and environments, and mountains, and, all this kind of stuff. And I was working late one night at my studio. I had all these chainsaws Husqvarna sent me. I just laid out there, and it's like 2 a.m. All I want to do is get home and go to bed. And I look out there. Outside the studio window, it's a second story outside stairs, postage stamp parking place with a couple cars in there, and I see someone going through the cars, and I thought, oh my God, and he had a tire iron. I thought, oh geez, what now? And had I been thinking, I probably would just stuck my head out and yelled at him, and he would have run off. But I didn't think in those terms. I thought I got to protect myself, so I grabbed the biggest chainsaw I could find and opened up the door, and I'm running down the stairs, trying to start it, just pulling on the rope.
Yeah.
And all I heard was that tire iron drop and feet going, and there was a vapor trail in the alley that led there. I mean, the guy ran like hell. I didn't know what to do other than that, but that seemed like a good idea at the time. So it's my chainsaw story.
That's awesome. That's awesome, and I'm glad that nothing serious came out of that.
No,
it's good as a story. It's good as a work of fiction that's nonfiction, I suppose.
No, it happened.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you anything that didn't happen.
Oh no, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's a good work of fiction that's nonfiction.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but I guess going back into some of your art career stuff. So I did want to ask you about this because I know that you helped revolutionize acrylic airbrush painting in the illustration world. And that you were also on the Iwata Pro Team. Is that correct? Which is a Japanese airbrush company?
Well, what they did is, I don't know if you call it Pro Team or not, but they would send me airbrushes to, like endorse or whatnot. They would do that, and that was a nice thing. I mean, again, that whole thing, it was a matter of being at the right place at the right time when all that happened, and I did get a Lifetime Achievement Award from Airbrush. I forgot, Airbrush Action, Airbrush Digest. They went under 2 different names at the time, and they sent that, and it was working with Charlie White and David Willardson, and Iwata had sent them a couple of airbrushes to use, and Mick McGinty and I were just brush painting things, and they didn't want to use the Iwatas because they were using their Pachets and they were used to them, and they wouldn't blow acrylic through those things. They would blow like wash and dyes and things. And so Mick was one who said, let's grab these airbrushes and have fun with them. So we started doing it, and Mick really took off with it. Then I started doing whatever it was I was doing, and it was just, they had that whole airbrush thing, and the California airbrush thing they called it at the time, which is as opposed to like some of the groups in New York like Pushpin that came out, which is very serious and cerebral. We were totally the opposite. We were having fun. There was no real thought behind it. We just, went like madmen, like kids in the candy store, having fun. So
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Just to clarify, what time period was that where you were using airbrush a lot?
That was probably 1980 through, and we moved here 1988. Moved here, I mean, up to Washington from Southern California. So probably between 1980 and I would say didn't quite make it into the 90s, but 88, 89. You know.
Yeah.
Some people kept doing it after that who did some great things, but by then, for myself, I was moving on to other things. I wanted to be a traditional painter, so I did that. And digital was just starting to rear its head at that point. So I think a lot of people moved into that era, in that area. And I kept moving backwards into the more traditional type things because I found that most intriguing. I mean, I admired the people who could do the digital, but that just wasn't me. If I couldn't feel, a pencil scraping across something or a layer of paint on my bristle brush, it just didn't have the same charge for me, I guess. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, because I think it was in the early 90s. I think it was 1990 where Photoshop first existed, or first, started to come into like a tool where, artists would be able to use it. I did want to ask why you didn't take the leap into digital, but you kind of just answered it. But
I don't have the brain power for it. How's
that? I don't think that's true. But
it's very true.
Okay, well, I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
But so I guess is that when you started going into and diving into wanting to do museum work?
Well, the narrative stuff, that did kind of come. I mean, I did, when I say narrative work, it was like storytelling pieces. And I enjoy doing so many different types of painting, trying to get as abstract as I can, just trying to go in different areas. But I also found doing narrative work to be very intriguing and very challenging at the same time because, you have to be able to design things out. You have to be able to tell a story. You have to be able to use perspective and all these other things, that fall into line. Mm-hmm. And I think after I exhausted some of the ideas of galleries, which I was never really crazy about, I just started doing things that any normal artist would not do, any smart artist would not do, any professional artist would not do, and that's to paint things that you cannot make a living on. I'm very good at painting misery and torment. I do the Japanese American internment, which is actually there's a lot of silver linings and inspiring parts to that. I don't just paint misery; I also paint things that really I try to show the best in people as well. Even though a very dark time, I always try to show either valor or charity in people at the same time. The light within the darkness type thing. Did the Tuskegee Airmen? I did a series on them. I did a series of the Northwest Coast First Nations people. And I'll do a lot of things like that. I mean, I've done a few things here and there on the Holocaust or things like that. But it's stuff that I find compelling and intriguing. I mean, I could make a lot more money if I were to do Western art like a lot of the people do, and people do it beautifully, but it just is not a call that really sings with me. I mean, I like to do it, but I just find these other things just compelling that I want to invest my artistic abilities in. And my wife hasn't left me yet after all these years for taking on those projects. Thank God. I want to keep her. So we've things like that. Yeah. And I did get interested in the museum thing so I could actually tell a story. Because I'm not one of these people who say, I just paint for myself. No, I don't. I paint to communicate with other people. I paint for, other people's sort of reaction.
So where do you think this deep interest in research and history comes from? Have you always been that way? Have you always, I guess, voraciously devoured information from books and things like that? Or where do you think it comes from?
Yeah, I think so. I've always been interested in history. I've always found things that have come before me very intriguing. I mean, there's a lot of people that say, well, they blame everything on their horrible upbringing and stuff like that, and they're they're expressing their torment either through history or something like else. I didn't have that. I had a great family. I had loving parents. I had a big brother who beat the living hell out of me, but he also encouraged me and is one of my very dearest friends. It was just an interest. It was something that I absolutely loved, and I just kind of pursued it. So that's what there's so many things in history that are so moving. A lot of history that isn't taught. Like one of the things of the Tuskegee Airmen, which is the African American pilots during World War II, during the time of Jim Crow and whatnot, and what they overcame and things of that nature. I just found totally intriguing, and I found that they didn't really cover that in history class. The same with Japanese American internment. What happened to the American citizens of Japanese ancestry who were rounded up and put into camps and things like that. A lot of people never knew about that until really recently.
Yeah.
And I found this, to me, these are stories that need to be told, and they're very compelling. And there's a lot of bad and a lot of good in these things. So.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think that's also a good segue to talk about your project on the History Channel, Hidden Heroes, the Nisei Soldiers of World War II. And I was just wondering how you got that project. I'm assuming it's because of, all the work that you've done with the Japanese internment. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to hear from you.
Yeah, that's definitely the catalyst for that, was the work I did for that. But also the History Channel went to the Go for Broke National Education Center in Los Angeles, and the director there is Mitch Mackey. And Mitch is just a real gentleman, and he's seen my work for a while and has been very supportive of it, especially in cases where I've gotten a certain amount of grief for painting that subject matter from certain people that think I shouldn't be painting it. But he was always been supportive, and when the History Channel came to him and said, we need an artist to do this, and he said, you got to go to Chris Hopkins. So they contacted me and saw my stuff and gave me the job. And then at that time is when I recruited Justin, my son, to help me.
Shout out to Justin.
Shout out to Justin, man. He's that guy. He's that. I can't tell you how lucky I am as a father to have someone like that in my corner. The guy, he paints better than I do. Don't tell him I said that.
Yeah, he's not going to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, he won't listen.
Yeah. We're going to restrict his RSS feed. Yeah. What'd you say?
He never listens to me.
Yeah. No, never.
No, he just and I told them at the History Channel, I said, I might need some help on this, and they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I know this guy. He's an artist. He's he's really, really good. Well, we haven't seen him, so we don't know. I said, no, you have to trust me on this. I said, I taught him, his fundamentals. I can't say I taught him anything. I just taught him fundamentals, and he took off and went on his own journey. But and they said, well, you really vouch for him? I said, yeah, he's my son, Says, oh, well, yeah, we definitely want him. So Justin and I teamed up on that one. So it was great. He did a great job. He really knocked it out of the park, and they loved it. So it's going to be on, November 11th. So they will have that then. So that was a good project. That was a fun project to work on with him.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really awesome. Yeah, it seems that, just from talking to you about, your career and also how you got into it, it seems like you have just perpetually following your interests and just things kind of occur. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that play into this. I've been able to follow my interest, and I get a lot of support, again, from family. In this case, my wife and my kids, as before I'd got it from my mother and father and brothers, and it's been great. I mean, there's a lot of things in there that I think you really need to, realize, since I'm going off on tangents here, and one is to keep your ego in check, no matter what you do, whether you're following what you want to do and you get some success. Don't let your ego get out of check on this, and because if not, I think you're going to fail. I mean, I've heard in one interview that was done where an artist, and God bless this person for it, says, well, when people ask me what I do, I tell them I'm an engineer, so I don't want to tell them I'm an artist or something of this nature, because maybe they tell me they have like a 17-year-old niece or nephew or something who paints, and we just cannot relate. You see, I'm the opposite. I say, you got a 17-year-old niece or nephew? Oh man, let me see their stuff. And I say, if they want to talk to me, I give my phone number. I say, let's talk. Because when I was that age, I would have loved to talk to someone in the business. And I say, yeah, you're an artist. Maybe, hopefully you're not as good as me, because I do it every day of my life. And if you are and you're 17, then, oh my God, I'm in the wrong business. But I just love the idea that they want to do that. And I love the idea of being able to encourage them. I mean,
totally.
And someone asks me what I do, I always tell them I'm a painter. I mean, even one time my wife was part of a group show. And being a group show, there's a lot of people there, and they had a sort of a party thing or whatever afterwards at a real palatial type place, and there was a lot of people there. And generally what happens at these things with my wife, they surround her and they're asking her questions and stuff. I go over to the hors d'oeuvre table and graze, I stay away from all that. And this really wonderful, sweet lady comes up to me, while I'm grazing, and she says, you're Jan's husband, aren't you? And I said, well, yeah, And she said, oh, man, I love her work. And I said, oh, I do too. I absolutely love it. And she says, well, what's it like to be married to a famous artist? And I said, I love it. I have the privilege of seeing her start a piece and take it all the way to completion. It's just wonderful. And then she said, well, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a painter. And she just lit up like a Christmas tree. And she said, will you give me a bid on my house? That's a true story.
That's so good.
And of course, the only thing I could think of to say at the time was, "Well, will Friday work?" That was.
Wait, how long ago was that?
Oh, that had to be about 15 years ago or 20 years ago. It was a while back.
So good.
That's so funny.
Good. Because that also kind of plays into your image a bit too, like looking like a truck driver, or like a blue collar worker or something, and then so she immediately assumes. I think it's really interesting too, because you think about the idea of perception, right? And
right,
judging a book by its cover, and you never really know what people do, and something going to your point about hiding the fact that you're an artist. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it doesn't matter if you're doing blue collar work or if you're, doing whatever to, pay the bills. I think the most important thing is you do a disservice to yourself if you say these things to yourself, right? If you don't, right?
I think you're right, and to dovetail on that, here's another story time about that. Perception.
Story time with Chris Hopkins.
Yeah, story time with Chris Hopkins. Come up, children. So anyway,
gather around.
Gather around. Yeah, bring money. No, I had. I was still going to art center, and it was like a summer weekend. And if you have no money, and it's summer and you're in Pasadena, Glendale, it can be a very, very dull existence,
Oh yeah.
So
it's incredibly expensive.
Oh, poverty is just not working for me at that. Well, that was my life, but a guy calls me up, friend, he says, hey, Chris, let's go do something today. So my brother, he's a engineer over at Shelter Records. Oh, you want to go over there? They're going to be recording a couple acts today. And I said, well, sure. Let's kill some time. So we go over there and we meet his brother. His brother's kind of this hippie guy, real sweet guy. And we're in sound rooms all over the place. And there's a guy who shows up. His name was Dwight Twilley. I'd heard of him, but not much. And he wasn't overly friendly, but he was not unfriendly either. I mean, he was a nice guy. He was just there to do a job. And so he and his guitar player, and they're laying down lines, and they're going over and over in the sound room. We're sitting on the outside, listening. And I thought, well, I think I'll take a look around. So I walk around, and there's sound rooms all over the place, of course. And you go in there, they're real dead. I mean, you can hear yourself talk and maybe play an instrument. There's no ambient sound. And so I walk in there, and I see these two chairs, and my jaw just drops because I see this line of guitars up there on stands. And I'm sitting there, oh my God, I feel like Charlie just walking into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory here. And I'm looking around, there's no one there. So I say, God, help me. I'm a third-rate picker. I can't help myself. So I pick one of these incredible guitars, and I'm kind of playing away and all this stuff, and I'm playing some Stormy Monday Blues in G. And I look up, and there's two guys looking at me. And one guy's clearly a rocker. He's got the hair, he's got the clothes. We're in a semi-dark room. He's got shades on, he's got the stroke, everything. And there's a guy standing next to him who I didn't really notice too much. And so the rocker guy just kind of nonchalantly walks out. And the other guy stays, and he's got kind of dishwater blonde hair. He's got a flannel shirt on. His hair is not all that long. He's got jeans and tennies on. And I'm looking at him. He's looking at me. And I said, "My God, are these your guitars?" And he says, "Yeah." And so I start blathering and bloviating, and try to apologize and run up there and put the guitar up there. And the guy says, No, it's okay. You just go ahead and play. So I said, okay. So I'm playing. And so he picks up a guitar and sits in the chair next to me. And he's playing. And it was just, God, the guy's great. So I figured he's got to be the guitarist for this rocker who was here. So we stopped playing, and I thanked him. I said, "God, I never get a chance to do this. Thank you so much." And he said, "No, it's all right. It's a pleasure. I had fun." And I said, "Well, I'm an art student up the street in Pasadena and all this." He said, "Oh, great. Well, the guys and I are going to come in and record tonight. Why don't you come in tonight around 8 o'clock, and you could, be our guest and just hang out." And I thought, I'd love to, knowing that full well that I couldn't because, I'm at the mercy of my friend who was there. So I said, "Thank you so much for the good time." I stuck my hand out. I said, "I'm Chris Hopkins." And he shakes my hand. He says, "I'm Tom Petty." And I thought, Tom Petty, I've heard of you. So, and this was a guy, we talk about egos again, whose ego was totally intact. Just a sweet guy, not egotistical. He could have told me to get the hell out. Who do I think it was? But he didn't, and he's just a really nice guy. And I enjoyed that moment, that short moment. So anyway.
Yeah. I think that's a really good story and just a good lesson too. I think it's, for all of us, it doesn't matter if you're an artist or whatever you are, to observe the golden rule, right? To be able to treat, other people the way that you would want to be treated. And I think, I don't know. There's just this, I don't know. I've interviewed so many people now and, you get like a different sort of range of, different ideologies and philosophies, that people like abide by. And I don't know, just, it's interesting because like, I think that way very much the way that you think about not having an ego and it's not like I'm always perfect, but I try to remind myself about like, keep your ego in check sort of a thing,
Well, I think it's really important just to live life that way. So for some reason, there's some people that think that what we do is on the same level as open heart surgery or we're just people are in this business or stars or stuff. They're not. I'm sorry to break it to people like this, but you have the privilege of doing what you love to do. That does not make you famous. That does not make you better or worse than anyone else. It just means you've got that absolute privilege to be able to do what you love to do. And if you don't like it, then get into something else, But to me, there's really nothing other than that. That's like when I say, if I want to talk to a kid, a 17 or 18-year-old kid, whomever, and help them on their path to do what they want to do, I'm there. I'm going to do it. But at the same time, normally that isn't going to happen. They may, if they're 17, by the time they're 19, they're on to something else. But you might once in a while find that person who was the same way that we were. Say, I am going to pursue this, and they do. And you maybe supply a little inspiration to help them realize these opportunities that they have. And, and I look at it like that, and I'd much rather be in that position than be in between the dog and the fire hydrant type thing, so which a lot of people will, try to put you into that, and it happens, it's like eating gas station sushi or something.
Although if you eat gas station sushi in Japan, it's actually probably pretty good.
I would not know. I have not tried. But if I were to try it here, the short answer would be no. The long answer would be hell no. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, definitely not here. In Japan, the 7-Elevens actually have some really edible food, which is kind of surprising to think about, but it's actually really good. I'm not even kidding. But
I'll take your
Anyways.
word for that one.
Yeah, you can take my word for it. It's fine.
Sure.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
say
I
go
believe
to
this
Japan
guy.
to go to
Yeah.
7-Eleven. But gosh, I mean, there's so much to talk about. I mean, what other projects are you working on right now?
Well, right now I'm getting ready for a couple shows coming up. One of them has been delayed, which is called Storytellers: Two Friends, Two Cultures, and I'm doing a show with David Boxley. David Boxley is the nobleman and culture bearer for the Tsimshian native tribe up here, and he is probably considered the best native Tsimshian native carver of his generation. And he and I have been wonderful friends for a long time. And I started on that project with him, where he's going to have a lot of his carvings, his totem poles, and everything else. And his dance group, which is world renowned, is going to be opening the show there. And so I started painting a lot of his culture, but then it finally got on me. It says, two friends, two cultures. So I said, I want to paint some of my background. So I went on my father's side, and my father comes from Danish Viking. So I started doing a lot of narratives of Viking culture from way back when, in addition to the paintings of the Native American from the Tsimshian tribe. Mm-hmm. So that's one project. And also the thing about it too, we started this pre-COVID, so it's been sort of delayed. And the one thing we told these folks, and this didn't seem as hot as an issue at the time as it is now, is we have two guys, from David and myself, from two radically different cultures and backgrounds, who were just very good friends, and we have this absolute common understanding about life and family and whatnot. And so that was one of the things. And now it's a bigger point than it was before, which is what I like to put in a lot of my shows anyway, is a common understanding. Like, say, when my Tuskegee Airmen show opened at the Museum of Flight in Seattle, we had a council member and his friends there who used to be were former Black Panthers. And at the same time, we had people who were part of the Tea Party back then there, two extreme points of view. But they came together with this common understanding that they were paying tribute to the Tuskegee Airmen. And so these guys were talking and everything was fine. So this was kind of the big payoff to this. You see, if we really just take time to just talk to each other, you're going to find out a lot of things that maybe a lot of precepts are not there that you thought. And this worked. I was jazzed to see this happening. But anyway, and the next show I have, very important one, is with my wife. And we are going to have our internment show. Our Japanese American internment show is going to open at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art. Bainbridge Island was the first place where the Japanese Americans were rounded up and taken away and sent directly to Manzanar from Bainbridge Island. That was the first place it started. And so they're having some big celebrations for the 80th anniversary of Executive Order 9066 and the exclusion of the Japanese Americans, all American citizens. So that show opens then, and that's real important to Jan and I. So.
Is there a date for that yet?
Yeah, actually, the date for that is, I just wrote it down here too, because we just had a meeting today, March 11th, and it'll go on till into mid-June on that, on June 12th, actually.
Wow, what an
and the other show with the Storytellers opens March. What is that? I'm looking at that. 24th and goes to June 4th. So I'll have two concurrent shows. But yeah, the internment shows be very important. There'll be a lot going on around that show as well. So,
wow, what some great accomplishments! That's really awesome. I'm really excited for you, man.
Well, every now and then the blind pig finds an acorn. So.
I love that. I'm gonna have to use that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm just gonna overplay it. And I'm just gonna use it in every sentence.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, well,
yes.
At least 3 or 4 times a day.
Oh yeah,
buddy. Yeah. So okay. So for some of our young listeners out there, and also I'm asking this question for me as well. Mm-hmm. Because you've been doing this a majority of your adult life, and so when like after you went to art center and then you took up some blue collar work because you had to, During those moments where there's these trials and tribulations through your life, what are some of the things that you tell yourself to kind of get you out of that?
I don't get bucked off the horse. I mean, there's times that are really bad, and sometimes I'll do painting that I clearly, stepped all over my feet on, doing. I just don't give up. I just say, well, every now and then I might have to step back and take a breather, but I don't let anyone discourage me either. I mean, there were some periods in my life, even despite the fact that I had a very supportive family. I had a grandfather who told me I wouldn't amount to anything. Art-wise, he said, you're being a fool trying to be an artist. No one will do that. You're no good, stuff like that. I even heard that once from this big name illustrator from New York. Told me I sucked. I had no future in it and stuff like that. That I was wasting his time by having him look at my portfolio and things of that nature. I won't say his name, but he was this big name guy. Yeah. And I just kind of thought, the hell with you. I'll show you. So yeah. I just kept going. I actually did, believe in myself. Even now and then, you'll get down and you'll start questioning things. Then it's just really important to relax and really believe in what you can do. I've seen people who were, I've been in contact with for years, who started out being just artists you think could never really find that niche, or never could grab the handle and go on to the next level of art. And damned if they didn't, because they stuck with it, and they had encouragement from other people too. People who encouraged them to believe in themselves. Yeah. And they went forward and have done, God, I mean, I know one guy in particular, he's really done so well. And he used to put his artwork in the oven and bake it. When I first met him, I thought,
what do you mean, to destroy it or as a process?
Yeah, no, he thought that was his process. He'd paint the things, he'd put them in the oven and start baking them. I go, what the hell is that all about? So, damn, that's crazy. But then
I'd have to see this artwork. That sounds interesting.
Well, it wasn't that good, but now he's just a terrific painter, and he just stuck with it. And he listened to those who encouraged him more than taking heart to those people that would try to derail him, And I think that's what it takes. Believe in yourself, and don't be afraid to ask people for an honest appraisal. And your friends will give you an honest one, and they'll also give you encouragement. They'll never say, oh, you're no good. Get out of here. Start flipping burgers somewhere. They won't do that. They'll tell you, well, if you were to do this and this, you'll have a better piece. But you're on the road to something good. Do not stop. And they say it in all sincerity. I think that's the best medicine anyone could have.
Do you find that sometimes when people, if you look in the past, when people have been hypercritical outwardly towards you, do you think, when you take a step back from it after a longer period of time, do you think that those people are actually saying that to themselves but directing it towards you?
Well, it depends on what they're being hypercritical of. I've been, if it's artwork, sometimes you just have to consider the source. And I usually talk to people who I really respect, who I ask to criticize my work. Now, if it's something I've gotten a fair amount of criticism due to the subject matter that I paint. And a lot of times I have to try to blow that off. I'll admit it gets hard, sometimes. But, a lot of people have told me that I have no right to paint what I paint, Japanese American internment, or mostly that, some Tuskegee Airmen, things of that nature. And that's the kind of criticism you just have to try to file away in the circular file. So.
I see. Yeah. Well, I do want to ask one last question. I ask this of every guest. Generally, I think like 95% of the time. Do you have any?
No, I like it rare with cheese roasted on top with sesame seed bun. Will that answer your question?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There you go.
I personally prefer the Beyond Burgers, but that's just a personal preference.
Oh yeah, Justin and I have those, and Jan and Justin, those are very, very good. So
yeah, they're not bad. They're pretty good.
Bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like I said, I nothing like a big double, whatever, not a Whopper, but one of these places that are so good.
Yeah.
Avocado, lettuce, fresh tomatoes. Ooh, okay.
Ooh.
Oh, Yahoo!
That's hilarious. Yeah, so you answered my question, so I guess that's the end of the interview.
Oh, perfect. Couldn't be better.
Yeah. No, so the question is, what is your advice to artists and creatives? Do you have any?
Oh, basically what I said. Just pursue it. Don't give up on it. If you really love it, you're gonna go forward with it anyway. I mean, I speak from experience on that one. I mean, I was not born with an excess of talent at all. I mean, I've been around people. I went to art center with people who were, and people who showed their promise at a young age and had great teachers through their youth and teens and whatnot. My mother was born with an incredible amount of talent. My wife was. My son is I don't even know where to go with him. I mean, he seems to be able to do whatever he wants, and he does it very well. He's really good at so many things. I didn't have that, but what I was born with was an excessive love for it. And I worked so hard because I loved it, and I got better at it because I loved it so much. And I got pretty good at it because I kept doing it and I loved it. And I would just tell anybody based on that, just keep doing it. If you love it, don't give up on it. Just carry a sketchbook with you. Draw whatever's around you. That'll help you with your digital work. It'll help you with design. Look at things through the eye of a designer. I mean, I used to teach my son how to design a page by looking at Akira Kurosawa movies and show him how they would design each frame, his shots.
Yeah.
And then I could teach him the golden section and things like that off of that. And just look at things and take your sketchbook and do not give up. Just keep going forward with it. If you love it, it's going to be a labor of love. It's going to come like falling out of the boat and hitting water.
That's great advice. I love that advice.
Yeah, it worked for me.
Yeah. No, that's really great. Gosh, I think there was one more question that I wanted.
Well, you could talk about movie work. That was always crazy,
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that. Yeah.
But like the film stuff back then was totally insane, because you had so many different artists and agencies working on the same film. And I had an artist representative by the name of Randy Pate. And he swears to God this story is true, but I'm detecting a little skullduggery, but he wasn't really much for jokes and stuff. But he said this, he swore it's true. He used to rep a guy named Richard Amsel. Richard Amsel was the precursor to Drew Struzan. He was this great movie artist, and he inspired. I've never talked to Drew Struzan about it, but I'm sure he inspired me. Tell there was a lot of similar looks and whatnot. And two fantastic artists, both of those gentlemen. Amsel had he was one of the early victims to AIDS back in the early 80s. And there was an art director who called up my rep, and who was repping Richard Amsel, and called him in and said, "We've got this job. It's just perfect. Richard Amsel is the only guy that can do it. We don't want to even look at any other books. It's only Rich Amsel." And then my rep told me, he said, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but Richard died 2 weeks ago." And without hardly missing a beat, the art director said, "Well, offer him more money." my rep swore that was absolutely true, but it was, who knows. But then I know. And then there was one.
I mean, that's such a terrible thing, but I'm just not surprised. No, I'm not surprised knowing the type of industry that is.
Oh, it was so terrible back then in the like, this is before I got into the business back in the 70s. And I mean, it happened when I was in the business where they always wanted to sexualize things. They said, sex sells, as a promotion, let's give the girl more cleavage and we'll make the guy look younger, all this stuff, make their muscles bigger, all this sort of things. And there was a Jaws had come out, and what was so typical that they would do back then is they'd Burbank, not Hollywood, but Burbank, would make cheap knockoffs of it. Whether they had like American Graffiti, they did the TV thing on Happy Days, which ran several seasons too long, I think. But they had, when Jaws came out, they said, well, we'll do the same thing with grizzly bears, and we'll call it claws, So that my rep told me this one too. He said that they put out these, cheap movies, and they had these oversized grizzly bears rampaging through, and they had all these little thinly clad girls running around, And I guess they sent it back to the artist and said, well, can you show more thigh? Like, oh God, here we go again. Oh, and make their nipples stand straight up, so they look like they're scared. And I thought, they didn't tell the artist that. And he said, oh yeah, they did. And I said, oh, for the love of all things sacred. Jesus. It's just, and that's the way that business was. And then you had to use some art director psychology. And this one I used, story time again, kids. I was working on a Mel Brooks film. I can't even remember the name of it. It had his wife, Anne Bancroft, in it. I went in, and back then we didn't email. You had to go in for meetings and whatnot. I went in and I found out what they wanted. I did the sketch. They approved the sketch, everything on it. I did the painting, and I had to work around the clock. And I put in like two days without sleep. And I was living in Santa Monica, and I drove my Jeep out to Burbank, and instead of just dropping it off, I had to go into a boardroom in a meeting. They had an easel up there, and they had a black flap on it. I lifted up the flap and showed it to them. I was ready to go. I wanted to go take my wife out to dinner and then go home and just hit the bed hard. I was just exhausted. Yeah. And they looked at it, and they said, well, wait a minute. I think it would be better if we changed this around. Digitally, you could probably do it real easily, but at the time it took some major repainting, and you would hardly tell that there was anything done to it, but it would take still major repainting. And I just lost my cool. I mean, I kind of lost my mind, and I said, you guys, you're not serious. Oh yeah. I said, it's not going to change anything. Chris, do the changes. What? This is a stupid change. Very unprofessional. So anyway, I took it and I left. They said, you'll be back here at 10 tomorrow with the finished art. I said, oh God, it's taking me all night to do this. So I went home. I said, I got to get some sleep. So I laid down for a little bit and thought I'll get up and I'll do the changes and I'll, have it done. So I look out there and I'm thinking, well, it's light out there. I thought I'd sleep for an hour or two, and it was getting dark. Now why is it so light out? But the clock says 8 o'clock. I'll just go in the studio and finish it. And I'd slept through the night. It was 8 in the morning. I thought, holy crap!
Wow. Okay.
And I got to drive out to Burbank with it. And, oh no! So I did. The only thing I could think of to do when I went there is do the Hail Mary and just use psychology or something. So I went in there, the boardroom again. I bring in the artwork totally untouched. And before I took the flap off, I said, I want to apologize to each and every one of you people in here. I was very unprofessional. The only thing I can blame it on was lack of sleep, my defense. I'm so sorry for my outburst yesterday. Please forgive me. I did the changes, and the art looks so much better. You guys are spot on. And I hadn't touched it. So I flipped over, the piece, and they're looking at it. Oh yeah, that's it. You got it. Thanks, Chris. So I'm like, oh God, I dodged a bullet on that one.
That is so good. I love that story because there's so many crossovers with how the advertising world still is. And it's generally people that are in these power positions that they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, that's about right.
They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. And then and they don't even notice those fine details. And for some reason, through nepotism or what have you, maybe they both went to Brown University together or something. These people are in these positions of power, and they don't even know what they're looking at most of the time.
Well, it's really bad when you get, as when you get a committee in there. I mean, what's the saying? A camel is a horse done by committee, and that is so true. I mean, we've had these, where this committee comes in, you think you got it. Well, no, so-and-so comes in. Well, and so-and-so's pet dog Checkers comes in there, and they think you should change it. And it just gets absolutely convoluted and crazy after a while. You don't know what you're going to end up with, so. Yeah. And that's what I always remembered when I was an illustrator. And I was an illustrator for a long time, and thank God I'm not anymore, Anyway, yeah, that was. I mean, there's so many more, and I won't bore you with them, but there are a lot of different film eccentricities that we all had to live through back in those days, and it wasn't a shit show to say the least. So.
Yeah, I mean, they still exist. It's just in different forms, and if anything, it's just quicker because of the access to technology. But I think I've talked to tons of filmmakers by this time, and sometimes I just think like, and also maybe this is just me getting older and more empathetic and everything, but it's really hard to make a film, for instance, because of all of the time that goes into potentially trying, like, getting the funding and just all of the decision making once the funding's there, and then the studio process, and then all of that stuff. And I think I guess what I'm trying to get at is that this design by committee thing, it doesn't really work,
No, never does.
Yeah. And
it's ego on display more than anything, really. And to me, like, ego is nothing more than an anesthetic to deaden the pain of insecurity and at the most stupidity, really.
I like that. That's a good one.
Just my perspective on it.
That's a good one. You've been saving that.
No, I just thought of it. Just remember, I'm getting older here, and a lot of the synapses don't always fire when they should.
I mean, you seem pretty sharp to me, so.
Well. My wife and kids will probably tell you differently. So.
Well, they spend more time around you, so.
God bless them.
Yeah.
Or God help them, I guess.
Yeah, God help them. God help them and bless them. It's complicated,
Yes, it's very complicated. I'm a conflicted man here.
We all are. And for those listening, conflicted just people in general. But anyways, all right. Well, yeah. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate you for taking this time. I know you're busy and you have the project coming out soon on the History Channel, so I'm really excited to be able to see that.
Yeah, please check it out. I haven't seen it yet. For all I know, they'll just take out everything, and I hope not, but you never know.
Yeah.
But no, I'm excited to see that too, because I think the subject matter is so important. Really.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thanks for doing this.
Anytime, buddy. You give me a call and we'll get caught up on cheeseburgers and stuff, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Thanks.
although I recently started, or I switched to eating plant-based, so.
Well, you sissy. No. You are a wise man. So.
I don't know. I just am an experimenter. I don't know how much of wisdom comes with it.
Well, one thing I've learned about having an artist son is he really pushed me in the direction of experimenting. So it's good. Even food-wise, it's all good. Yeah. Anyway, buddy, you betcha. You have a great one, and I look forward to talking to you, or we can talk about martial arts and movies and just getting together over a cold one or two.
You know what? We should definitely have a conversation between me, you, and Justin.
Absolutely. I'd go for that in a second.
I think that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Well, I always love verbally abusing that boy. So, just count me in.
Yeah. Oh, no wonder he always takes it out on me.
He's having mercy on the old guy here.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I appreciate that. I hope he uses you like a whipping post.
Yeah. It's pretty bad. Yeah.
I taught him well.
Yeah. I'm going to have 30 more years of extreme trauma.
He never had it so good. Let's look forward to this.
Yeah.
Okay, buddy. We'll be talking with you then.
All right. Take it easy. Music for the podcast is by Rarebit, aka Justin Dosher Hopkins. Creative producer is Noah Wainwright. YouTube and creative support is by Tyler Scully. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you next time.